So a lot of people, they're drug addicts in this country. I'm willing to say that 95% of Americans are drug addicts. And what is one of the common themes with drug addiction? Whatever drug it is, alcohol. Yeah, brain damage, liver damage. Cocaine, brain damage. You can get brain damage, so on and so forth, Meth can cause some issues with your brain, right? One of the common themes with drug addicts is brain damage. Now, again, I personally consider drug addiction to be a health issue. We should not be throwing people in jail for whatever their drug of choice is. But if we define an addiction as doing something that's bad for you because it feels good in the moment, and if 95% of Americans, which we know from a study that was done, don't eat fruits or vegetables, and what do they eat? They eat drugs. And so what happens when you eat drugs? Well, I've said this multiple times on my show. It fucks your brain up. And so here we have a study that has come out, or at least this is an article about the study. Ultra-processed foods may lead to cognitive decline. Cognitive decline. I think Joe Biden's been eating one too many Mickey D's. Same thing with Donald Trump, of course. Scientists have known for years that unhealthy diets, particularly those that are high in fat and sugar, may cause detrimental changes to the brain and lead to cognitive impairment. Many factors that contribute to cognitive decline are out of a person's control, such as genetics, socioeconomic factors, but ongoing research increasingly indicates that a poor diet is a risk factor for memory impairments during normal aging and increases the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. But when evaluating how some diets may erode brain health as we age, research on the effects of consuming minimally processed versus ultra-processed foods have been scant, that is, until now. Two recent large-scale studies suggest that eating ultra-processed foods may exacerbate age-related cognitive decline. Mush mouth. And increasing the risk of developing dementia. In contrast, another study reported that ultra-processed food consumption was not associated with worse cognition in people over age 60. So again, one of the big things with this is aging. Right? Aging. It's one thing to have fast food once or twice a month. That's going to have minimal, if any, impact. And fast food, ultra-processed food, frozen meals, whatever the meals, quote unquote. It's all the same shit. It's exactly the same because fast food is just frozen food that they cook for you. That's pretty much it, right? So it's all the same shit, really. And but if you eat it every day, it's an addiction. It's an addiction, right? And you can be addicted to a drug, and you can know all the negative effects and say, well, the positives outweigh the negatives. For example, I consider myself addicted to coffee. I'm addicted to caffeine. Right? I have to drink caffeine every day, otherwise I have a shitty mood. But I like caffeine. I like coffee. I like the ritual. I like pouring it. I like making it. I like smelling it. I like coffee. It's an addiction that I decided, you know what? Fuck it. I'm in. I'm in it for the long haul. I'll strap in. I will accept the negative health outcomes. And I'll make the best out of the positive benefits from caffeine. And we'll call it a day. Right? But how many people truly, really understand that the food that they're eating on a daily basis is drugs? Right? Do you know that? Like, do people know that? Like, people might be aware that it's unhealthy, but there's a difference between unhealthy and drugs, right? Hot Pockets are not unhealthy. It's a drug. It is made in a laboratory, right, to produce the extremely addictive outcomes in the brain, right? They put high levels of salt and sugar and fat and combine them in a certain way that creates an addiction pathway in your brain. That's what it does. It's a drug. And to top it all off, there's no nutrition in it. And what little nutrition there might be in it can't be absorbed properly because your body doesn't know how to absorb things that are put together in such a ridiculous fashion. So let's keep going though. Lots of ingredients, minimal nutrition. Ultra-processed foods tend to be lower in nutrients and fiber and higher in sugar, fat, and salt compared to unprocessed or minimally processed foods. Some examples of ultra-processed foods include soda, packaged cookies, chips, frozen meals, flavored nuts, flavored yogurt, distilled alcoholic beverages, and fast foods. Even packaged breads, including those high in nutritious whole grains, qualify as ultra-processed in many cases because of the additives and preservatives they contain. Another way to look at it, you are not likely to find the ingredients to make up these foods in your home kitchen. I don't think most Americans would find anything in their home kitchen because most Americans don't know how to cook. But don't confuse ultra-processed foods with processed foods, which still retain most of their natural characteristics. Well, this is a problem here, is because there's multiple forms of processing, right? Processed versus ultra-processed. It's a very loose thing. I think it's good as a rule of thumb to ignore most ultra-processed foods, but not all ultra-processed foods are the same, and certainly not all processed foods are the same. But anyway, there are examples. Canned vegetables, dried pasta, frozen fruit. I would say canned vegetables and frozen fruit, they're pretty good. Dried pasta, though, I mean, it's like it's just not healthy for you. Like, is it uniquely damaging in the same way that cheeseburgers at McDonald's are? No, not even close. But let's be honest, regular pasta is just not good for you. Like, that's just canned vegetables and frozen food. That's actually good for you. Pasta is not. So it's a weird group of examples. In December 2022 study, researchers compared the rate of cognitive decline over approximately 8 years between groups of people that consume different amounts of ultra-processed foods. At the beginning of the study, over 10,000 participants living in Brazil reported their dietary habits from previous 12 months, then for the ensuing years. The research evaluated the cognitive performance of the participants with standard tests of memory and executive function. Those who ate a diet containing more ultra-processed foods at the start of the study showed slightly more cognitive decline compared to those that ate little to no ultra-processed foods. This was a relatively modest difference in the rate of cognitive decline between experimental groups. It is not yet clear if the small difference in cognitive decline associated with higher consumption of ultra-processed foods will have a meaningful effect at the level of an individual person. Once again, it's all about harm reduction, right? Like, if you eat... again, let's use the alcohol comparison here. If you compare alcohol to sugar, a lot of the diseases that you get are very similar. Now, alcohol causes some diseases that sugar doesn't. Sugar causes some diseases that alcohol doesn't. But as far as two drugs that are easy to compare, they're pretty easy to compare. So let's compare them, alcohol and sugar. Right? If you have one glass of wine every month, is that actually gonna do anything to your body negatively? Like, unless you've got like some severe, like you're extremely like sensitive to it or something, right? That's probably gonna cause some damage. But you can also say that if you have not even like a glass of wine, right? If you have like one sip of wine every day of your life, one sip. Like, we're talking, like, not even like a big sip, not a glug, not like a swallow or a gulp, but we're talking like, you know, like a can here. Like, is that really going to cause negative health? Just one sip a day? Probably not, right? Because, again, ultimately, the poison is in the dose, right? So, really, what you need to understand here when it comes to drugs like sugar and alcohol is how quick does it take your body to reach like a homeostasis kind of equilibrium level in your systems, right? And when you're eating junk food every single day, your body never gets time to rest. If you eat junk food once a week, your body is resting for 6 days out of the week. And when you take that junk food in, the effects are going to be severely diminished because your body is ready. Your body's in your prime. Your body's ready to fight back against the bad parts. And you can say, you know what? It's worth it. Smoke a little weed, eat some pizza, live a little, right? That's fine. But when it becomes an everyday situation and you're doing it 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or you're eating drugs, that's a problem. And yeah, it can affect your brain. So think about it. The second study, with about 72K participants in the UK, measured the association between eating ultra-processed foods and dementia. For the group eating the highest amounts of ultra-processed foods, approximately 1 out of 120 people were diagnosed with dementia over a 10-year period. For the group that consumed little to no ultra-processed foods, the number was 1 out of 170. Research examining the relationship between health and ultra-processed foods uses the NOVA classification, which is a categorization system based on the type and extent of industrial food processing. Some nutritionists have criticized the NOVA classification for not having clear definitions of food processing, which could lead to misclassification. So the NOVA system essentially is like, what level of processing, right? So instead of having processed and ultra-processed, right, it expands that to 4 levels, right? You have NOVA level 1 is, just the food itself. NOVA level 2 is like you do something to it, but not, you don't add any ingredients, but let's say you cut up the apple and you have an apple slice, right? Then let's say NOVA level 3 is you blend up the apple. Now you got applesauce, right? NOVA level 4 is, let's say you juice the apple and you add extra sugar to it, and you add some food dye and then you got yourself an ultra processed situation. So essentially the NOVA classification system is just trying to have more numbers on the number line and to explain them. Now again, is it perfect? No. Obviously, you could have a NOVA level 5, a NOVA level 10. You could have a 10-point scale. You could have a 20-point scale. You could have not even a number line, but you could have one of those triangle graphs. You can have all kinds of way of detailing food, right? So obviously the criticisms of the NOVA system are it's not as granular as a perfect system would be. But again, it's better than processed versus ultra processed for sure, right? So again, just got to be... we're moving in the right direction as far as coming up with better ways to figure this stuff out. But still, obviously, our tools are not perfect. Many ultra-processed foods are high in additives, preservatives, or coloring agents, while also having other features of an unhealthy diet, such as being low in fiber and nutrients. Thus, it is unclear if eating food that has undergone more processing has an additional negative impact on health beyond low diet quality. That's the big thing here. I'm willing to say that ultra-processing does do worse for you than just eating bad ingredients overall. And really that's just in the form of ultra processed foods typically are dehydrated, right? They have less water in them, so you're going to eat less water with your food. That's one example. Shelf stability, they're going to add some preservatives, anti-caking agents, and other such things and so forth. You could say it's benign, but is it better to have that kind of shit or not have it at all? It's right? You have to think about that. And if you're doing this every day, if you're eating these kinds of foods every day, it builds up, right? So let's say, let's say you have 10 points of damage that you can take, and eating ultra processed foods does 1 point of damage every day. But let's say your health recovers at a rate of full health within 36 hours. It's just you never reach that full recovery rate. And so your health is just getting fucking, slowly chipped away. There's my video game metaphors for you. Again, eating junk food is great every once in a while. We live in America, baby. Every once in a while, eat some drugs. Let's live a little. Right, but anyway, you can read more about this. I talk about this stuff all the time, but the big thing is don't eat this shit every day. Otherwise, you're going to have dementia when you're 53 years old. So that's my little hyperbolic claim there. But again, more science and research is being done every day, and more studies are coming out that suggest, and I'll use the word suggest here, that maybe eating junk food and being a drug addict has negative health outcomes. It shouldn't be a surprise. We shouldn't need to study this stuff, but we do. And again, the default in America is to be you are born and bred and raised to become a drug addict when it comes to sugar companies, right? That's why they market soda to kids. That's why they market juice boxes to kids. because they want you to become addicted. They put corn syrup in baby food, in baby formula. There's like 3 or 4 different companies that control the entire baby formula market, and most of them put corn syrup in the baby formula so that you become addicted. I don't know what to tell you. Sounds like a conspiracy, but that doesn't mean it's not true. The writing's on the wall on this one. We're fucked. We're fucked. So I say eat as many whole foods as you can. And the default is eating junk food every day in this country. I would say most Americans, the default. Now again, most Americans I know, poor motherfuckers, okay? But poor motherfuckers, the default for us, for being poor, is to eat garbage, to spend the less amount of money as you can on food, which again, you either have to pay the farmer or pay the doctor. If you pay the doctor when you're 30, you could have been paying the farmer throughout your 20s and you wouldn't be in that situation. Spend the same amount of money, be in a way better spot, right? So, but yeah, the default is you're eating drugs all day, every day. That's the default in this country. So if you can reduce that even a little bit, let's say you have a salad, 1 meal every day, just the salad. I mean, it goes a long way, trust me. But anyway, there you go.